Thank you, Jill, and good evening, everyone. Me and Sammy are really glad to be here. I'll just introduce myself. This is Manisha Verma. I am the Associate Chair for Clinical Research at Einstein Healthcare Network, which is now a part of Jefferson University. So we are a bigger part of the bigger home. But I am very proud to say that we are conducting some clinical trials for patients with PBC. Since the autoimmune nature, it is the treatments are evolving. There is no cure as of yet. And giving the example of Hep C in the past, we have been a part of those treatment trials as well. And patients like you who were willing to participate, take the risk. Now, and there is always some unhidden risk when you are learning the term clinical trial. But we are always here to kind of help the patients make the right decisions for themselves so they really understand what they are committing to and make the decisions. And actually, I'll share a little story of a patient who was a part of the Hep C trial long ago. And then within 2 to 3 weeks, he himself noted his viral load dropping down to almost nil and then undetectable. So, kind of feeling that Hep C is cured in himself as by being a part of the trial and sharing his story that of itch particularly, that he was a drummer and he was like, I will continue to beat the drums, but I won't itch. It was his decision to not do that and still kind of focus away. So I feel I learned so much from him just by being a part of where we are also conducting like a research advisory board where we have patients and key stakeholders coming up with their opinion on what would they like to do as a part of research. What do they think will be important as outcomes to patients? And kind of designing the trials with their input in mind. We are constantly evolving in the field of hepatology. And I feel the unique nature for PBC is its autoimmune nature and collaborate, you would say, comorbidities of other autoimmune diseases, particularly like GI, if it's Crohn's disease or it's rheumatoid arthritis. So that comorbidities impact this patient population much differently than others. So we are actively conducting 2 to 3 trials for patients with PBC in the Philadelphia region. Our patient population mostly comprises patients from Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. We are one of the large transplant centers. Now Jefferson has its own transplant center, so we are kind of now overbeing or seeing, or you would say, participating in 2 large transplant centers of the region. So almost 80 to 90% of the patient population who are in that category of transplant usually are served by my own kind of colleagues and friends here at Einstein and Jefferson. With that background, I'll just introduce Dr. Sami Alam. He comes from Miriam, which is a pharmaceutical company where they are working on designing and actually conducting a trial, particularly aiming to reduce the itch. So we already had a few PVC trials, but our decision to participate in that trial was the primary outcome, itch. I am very much fascinated and motivated by patients themselves making the decision for treatments which will best suit them. I think this is one of those examples. And he serves as the medical science liaison at the pharmaceutical industry, where he kind of liaises with many other transplant centers and hepatologists so that we can enroll as much as patient population as possible within a shorter duration of time, since one center cannot really enroll like 300 patients at once. So it is a multi-center trial. And it has some good outcomes to achieve and kind of gain. We will share some of those now, and he will also share the name of our study coordinator, who is always very happy to talk to patients should there be interest and further questions on if you are interested to participate. We can connect you to our center or to other centers which might be local. Miriam is so nice that they cover the patient's transportation. So should there be opportunities where people are interested to join from far, we can kind of brainstorm ideas on how we can help you participate and how the research can benefit from your participation. So I'll pause here. Sammy, it's all yours. So you can share the screen and move on. I'll be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Verma, as well as Ms. Jill Harlan, for giving not just myself, but having the opportunity to represent Miriam in such a meeting It's very, very important to us that, we have these interactions with patients themselves. I mean, the science aside, there's many perspectives and insights that we get from patients. So, I'm very, very grateful to be at this meeting today and really appreciate y'all having me. With that, I'll go ahead and share my screen if you just allow me one moment. All right, just want to make sure that everyone can see my screen. All right, thank you very much. So yeah, like I said, and like Dr. Verma has introduced me, my name is Dr. Sami Alam. I'm located around the Dallas, Texas region. I do have a little bit of a cold, so you're gonna have to excuse me. The weather in Dallas doesn't seem to make up its mind. And so people just catch things left and right. So whatever local bug is going around, it is now my friend. So this presentation is called A Rare Opportunity to Make a Remarkable Impact and is focused specific on our PBC trial. I'm a clinical trial liaison in the medical affairs department. And just to give a little bit of a background on Mirum, we are headquartered in Foster City, which is a suburb city, right south of San Francisco. But we are a global organization and company. We do have a European headquarters in Basel, Switzerland. We have 160 plus employees globally. Many folks who have worked in the pharmaceutical industry or in rare disease for various lengths of time, and all of them who are committed towards making a difference in the space of cholestatic liver diseases, which is where our efforts go. And the key focus in those cholestatic liver diseases is the itch. So we're dedicated to helping transform the lives of these patient communities that we're serving. And we're committed to ensuring that the voice of not just the patients, but their caretakers, their families, and advocates are heard in order to, bring some new therapies to some of these patients who suffer from conditions with unmet needs from a treatment or management respect. We strive to be great partners and collaborators with a unified purpose and ensure that patients globally are introduced to some of these new therapies that address rare liver diseases. So I know that the first rare liver diseases that probably comes to your mind is PBC, primary biliary cholangitis, and that's the one that we'll be focusing on today. But if you see this list here, which is our pipeline, you'll see that PBC is not the only cholestatic liver disease that we're working on. We're working on both the pediatric space as well as the adult space. In pediatrics, our product is called Maralixabat, and in the adult side it is called Volixibat. On the pediatric side, we have been FDA approved for pruritus in patients with Alagille syndrome over the age of 1. But these other ones over here, like PFIC, progressive familial intrahepatic cholestasis, and biliary atresia, are still under investigation for those conditions. But for Alagille, we are FDA approved. And like I said, this is Maralixabat, our pediatric compound, not to get confused with the Volixibat, which is the one that we'll be talking about today, which is also an investigational product. So it's in its clinical trial phases. And we are studying this in, first and foremost, primary biliary cholangitis, and then also primary sclerosing cholangitis in the realms of hepatology, and then also intrahepatic cholestasis of pregnancy. And this is more in the area of obstetrics. This is a picture of Livmarli. This is that FDA approved product. And like I said, this is in the on the pediatric side. So it's approved for the treatment of cholestatic pruritus in patients with Alagille syndrome 1 year of age or older. So now let's move on to Volixibat potential in adult cholestasis. Disclaimer, this presentation does not provide instruction on the appropriate use of any of Mirum's products or candidates. Information presented regarding any product candidates that have not been approved for distribution in a particular country or have not been found safe or effective by any regulatory agency
Notifications.
and are not approved for use outside of clinical trials in that country. And the information presented.
Alexa, notifications. One new notification from Amazon Shopping. A shipment.
The information presented herein should not be interpreted or construed in any way as providing medical advice or as a replacement or substitute for medical advice provided by a healthcare provider. That was at 100 miles per hour, but I have to get that disclaimer out of the way. So this is a slide that sort of tells the characteristic of the itch that's in cholestatic liver diseases and specifically in PBC. I think it's important to know that this is, different from an itch that patients may have from allergies or from something like atopic dermatitis. This one has been described with adjectives and descriptions like it's bugs crawling under the skin. It's deep, it's burning, it's urgent, it's relentless, and they still haven't found something to alleviate it. And this is coming directly from the Canadian PBC Society. So their quote was that we take various medications, but most are ineffective. And it can be crazy making, especially at night when it's usually the worst for most folks. We struggle with resisting the desire to rip our skin off, much less get to sleep. And I think that that's a very impactful statement to describe something like itch, which may not be at the forefront of many providers or healthcare professionals' priorities when they're dealing with some liver patients. So now it's time to talk about what volixibat really is. Volixibat is something called an IBAT inhibitor, IBAT, which stands for ileal bile acid transporter inhibitor. In more or less words, what happens is that the reabsorption of your bile acids happen in your ileum, in your intestines. If the transporter for those bile acids is blocked, then it will block most of that recirculation of some of these bile acids. In that case, once you block their reuptake, then they only have one way to go out, and that is that they are, it increases the fecal excretion of these bile acids. So in more or less terms, you are pooping it out. So the IBAT inhibitors reduce the amount of bile acid recycled by the liver by interrupting that enterohepatic circulation. And then we're hoping that the use of these IBAT inhibitors decreases serum bile acids. And what we're hoping is that the IBAT inhibitors will show improvement in the pruritus as well as other quality of life measures. Let's go on to talk about the study. As I mentioned earlier, we are in the investigative phases and clinical trial phases for volixibat, which is that drug that we are studying in our adult population for primary biliary cholangitis. We have a few studies going on, but the one that I want you to sort of pay more focus to, or the magic word to sort of take home for today, is this word right here, VANTAGE. So VANTAGE is the name for our study, which is the efficacy and safety of volixibat in the treatment of cholestatic pruritus in patients with primary biliary cholangitis. So the core study is about 7 months long. There is a 4-week screening beforehand, and we are looking for PBC patients with a level of pruritus. Once you complete the core study, then you can move on to the open label extension. Unlike other liver disease studies, which target disease progression, our primary endpoint is the change in pruritus from baseline to 28 weeks. Our secondary endpoints are safety and tolerability, markers of disease and quality of life. And then long-term assessments are the changes in pruritus and quality of life, markers of disease progression and safety. But just to kind of sum up this slide for you so that you understand how this study is working, there's been other studies, and I was speaking with Dr. Verma about this. Sometimes when patients take part in clinical trials, and let's say that this investigative product does, provide them with some level of improvement or relief in their condition or symptoms or whatever the target may be, a lot of times they only get it for the length of that core clinical trial. And then once it's over, they're sitting asking, now what? We're not going to have access to this medication any longer now that the clinical trial is up. So to sort of address that, there is this open label extension, which will last 2 years after the successful completion of the study. I think it's also important to know that while you're on the study, patients will be randomized 1:1:1, meaning there's a 20 milligram dose that's taken twice a day. There's an 80 milligram dose taken twice a day, and then there is a placebo group. So that's the 1:1:1. Over here, you'll see that there's an interim analysis for dose selection. So once we hit this number of 60 patients, which means 20, 20, 20 in each one of those 3 arms, then one of those 2 doses will be selected, after which they will be randomized 1:1. So someone will be on that dose that's selected for volixibat or on the placebo. Now, it's important to note that after successfully completing this core study, whether you were randomized to the volixibat or to the placebo, once you enter that open label extension, or if you choose to, then everyone will get the volixibat. Does that make sense? And I hope that that's clear to everyone. I know that the slide can be a little bit to take in sometimes. I think it's really important to know, we at Mirum, we're very, very focused on the feedback and insights we get from not just the patients, not just the advocacy groups, but also the investigators, the administrators, to sort of find solutions that make things convenient and for everyone, make things easier for everyone, and keep everyone happy. So it is designed with input from the patient community. All the Vantage study investigators are hand-selected for their expertise in the care of specifically PBC patients. I think another thing that is worthy of note is that, there's about 10 study visits in that 7-month span that I told you was in the core study. A little under half of them can be done remotely, which makes it easier for, again, the patient, who is participating in the clinical trial, as well as the investigator conducting the clinical trial. I also want to know, and I think Dr. Varma had alluded to this earlier, that we do have travel amenities for patients, that are covered whenever possible. So, we do understand that some of these patients are coming from a few hours away just to get to some of these visits, and, would not want to make that extra trip or take that extra transport to show up to some of the research visits. So, everything from a door-to-door service for those who are farther away. There's even, accommodation and airfare, but this is all discussed with our travel vendor. But we do have travel amenities available for patients who are interested in taking part in the trial, but are finding it cumbersome or difficult to attend some of these visits. And then, like I said earlier, we have this optional long-term extension treatment after that initial 28 weeks of treatment, which is 2 years long, in which all patients receive volixibat. We're incredibly grateful to the Community Liver Alliance and the PBC patient community. We appreciate you helping us understand patient experiences, perspectives, for being so open and sharing your stories. Y'all are the ones that keep us inspired, motivated, and determined. And we're just so honored and proud to be a part of this community, and an active part at that. If you would like more information on the trial, please do visit vantagepbcstudy.com. So like I said, the magic word to take home with you today is Vantage if you're interested in the study. And the link is vantagepbcstudy.com. And once you're on that website, it's a patient website. It'll sort of guide you to your next steps if you're truly interested in taking part in the study. I also do want to point out that before pursuing participation in any clinical trial, please inquire with your personal healthcare provider to see if this is the best decision for you, or if this is beneficial for you. To reach staff at Einstein Healthcare Network, please contact Miss Laura Clark, and her email is right here. It's laura.clark@jefferson.edu. I know not all of you are local to the Philadelphia area, but for those of you that are, this contact information may be of use. I really appreciate those zoning in from various time zones across the US. I know it's kind of later in the evening for some and earlier in the afternoon for others, but I really do appreciate this time slot that you all have allotted me. And if you have any questions or comments, I'd be happy to take them at the moment. If there's something that I cannot answer right now, right off the top of my head, then I'd be happy to get your information and connect you to someone that can.
I just have a couple questions.
Sure.
So I wanted to know, I think you had mentioned, Sammy, something about the level of itch that PBC people have to have in order to participate. Is there can you talk more about what that means?
I can, absolutely. I mean, I cannot go into an extreme level of depth as to give you absolute type of numbers, but I will say that the itch scale and this is only because of confidentiality type of purposes, but I'll try to do the best I can to give you a good idea here. So the scale that we're using is called the Ichiro scale, which is your 0 to 10 scale, 0 being no itch at all, and 10 being the worst itch that you have ever felt in your life. One thing that I will say is that you don't have to have the most severe form of itch to take part in this trial. There are patients with just a mild to moderate level of itch that can still likely qualify, granted that all of the other eligibility criteria have also been met. And one thing I'll also put out there that I don't think I had mentioned earlier is that one other way that this clinical trial is a little more friendly to some of the patients that may potentially be interested is that we do allow the use of some of these concomitant medications that many PBC patients may already be on. So that way it doesn't necessarily really modify this current regimen that you're on. I will mention that the concomitant use of the medications is allowed, granted you've been on a stable dose. But I hope that scale question at least gave you a better idea of the level of itch that.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you had to have a severe itch to participate or.
Awesome.
Because some of the itch I have is sometimes it's random, sometimes it's bad, sometimes it's not. It comes and goes.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And the stuff I take right now is horrible. I take Colistrium pack. I think it's called Colistrium. Yeah. Powder packets. And sometimes I don't even take them because it's just so awful. So, I mean, that's great that you're trying to look into some alternatives.
So maybe I'll add to it is, I think, Daniel, you make a very good question because that is what everybody is asking, like, how do I qualify? So what I have learned from this design is that this is a very pragmatic approach. They are looking at an average itch score over a certain time duration. They're looking for moderate to severe itch to begin with. So when clinical trials are being done, you want to begin at some point to make a change to another point. If you're increasing patients with very, very mild itch, I think the sample size, which is a statistical term for clinical trials, you need to enroll many, many hundreds of patients if you are starting with your low baseline. So if you're starting with moderate to severe, you can still enroll a sizable amount and reach the primary outcome because power analysis becomes, again, a statistical term. It becomes so critical for FDA and for moving this drug forward into treatment. You want to make sure you have the right population. So that's why the clinical trials sometimes are very selective. But there is a couple of other trials also which are ongoing, which don't really look at itch scale, but they are looking at, the liver function tests. What is your baseline liver score, your fibrosis score, or other things? So there is always other active studies as well. Again, we started to participate in this just because it's a little bit unique. It is a very pragmatic approach. They are allowing patients to still continue with their routine standard of care. You're not saying don't do this because now you are going to be in this medication, because I think the control is that you are, despite doing all the standard of care, you still have the itch. It's not curing. That is the problem which I think still medicine is facing, is there is no curative option, or there is no symptomatic perfect management per se for the itch for PBC patients. But thank you all for listening.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Verma. One thing I'll just end off with is that I would say if you're a PBC patient and you have any level of itch that is consistently affecting you or your daily activities on a regular basis, after checking with your provider, I would urge you to at least look into this study and read up more into it to see if this is right for you. Like I said, any level of itch that you think that may be significantly affecting, you or your daily activities or your routines, I would highly urge you to at least look into it. Of course, after being cleared by your provider.